protection specialist with Chickening Open Lands. We are a land conservancy here in Berrien County, and we're one of the partners in the Southwest by Southwest corner SISMA. Wanted to introduce a couple people that we have speaking today. We have Chris Vera with MDOT. What's your title, Chris?
Resource specialist.
Resource specialist. And we also have Dr. Kuhn, who talked earlier. We want to talk about, Chris is going to talk a little bit about some of the things that MDOT is doing in their invasive species control program and knotweed control in particular. And then we'll kind of open it up, kind of a roundtable discussion, ask questions, comments. If there's anybody that's working on knotweed control and has some ideas to share, we want to kind of have this be an open forum for people to talk and ask questions. So I'll hand it over to Chris to get started.
Yeah, I work for the Michigan Department of Transportation, and I work for the Southwest region, which covers Kalamazoo, Van Buren, Berrien, Cass, Branch, Calhoun, St. Joseph. Thank you. We used to cover Berry and Allegan also, but just last year, Governor Snyder had a regional prosperity index plan, which they gave Allegan and Berry to the Grand region on Grand Rapids, which kind of disappointed me because I lost out on the Allegan State Game area and the Berry State Game area. And now I spend way too much time on the N4 corridor, but that's just neither here nor there. What I wanted to talk about real quick was, okay, I know it doesn't show up very well, but we have a herbicide program that's run out of our Operation Field Services office in Lansing, and they put together the main program. They buy all our products, and they research new products, new mixes, new application techniques, and then every April we have an annual pesticide training where all of our certified applicators are required to attend. And then people doing my job, there's 7 of us in the state, 1 for each region. We're there because we're dealing with the regulatory aspects and a lot of the planning. So we have that every April, just to make sure everybody's up to speed. And one thing that we have available to our staff, this is a couple of snapshots of an internal MDOT website. And this is from the Operation Field Services. And you can't see very well, but this has links to application rates, our drift management plans. You can get copies of spray logs. You can get archive spray logs. And then there's all kinds of other links on here. One I'm going to show on here in a little bit is a site called Drift Watch, which is what we use to identify certified organic farms, beekeepers, and other sensitive areas that we need to be aware of when we're doing our herbicide applications. And this also has links to the manufacturers of the products we use, so we can download the labels, the MSDS or SDS as they're called now for each product. And also every year we put together a manual, a spray manual for each one of our applicators, and that contains the updated labels and SDS sheets for all of our products, and also has our drift management plan, which is required by law, and has our application rates, which are sometimes tweaked from year to year. And we go over all that at that training. And then also they have a calendar in here with dates for training, because we get credits from MDARD for having this training every year, but we only get a day and a half worth of credits, and we need more than that for our applicators to be certified and keep the certifications. And so we put trainings and list them on this calendar that are available for our applicators to go out and get additional training, because most of our applicators are certified in category 3A, 3B, which is turf and ornamental, and then 6, which is right away. And then we're starting to have a lot of people certified in category 5, which is aquatic. A few years back, the EPA came out with some new rules regarding spraying near water. And as hard as we tried, we could never get a definition of what near means. So we have to get an NPDES permit every year and keep track of all our spray logs. You had a slide of, the information you gather for each spray. And we have ours, well, we're hoping to get it all digital, have iPads for everybody in the field so they can do their spray logs as they complete their spray applications each day, and then put them on a common drive so I can access them.
Are most of the folks you see mowing the rights of way, are those contracts, or are those folks that are certified applicators that work for you?
The general mowing is done by contractors, but we also have people out there. We used to have some mowers rigged up with what we called wet kits that would cut brush and apply at the same time. We don't do that as much anymore because it just wasn't very effective. We're focusing more on broadcast spraying and things of that nature. And we do some more specialized mowing on our own also, but just the standard mowing within, we usually do 2 whisks along like I-94. I saw some mowers out this morning. Those are contract mowers. But another thing we've just initiated, we had a new mowing contract come up this year. We went out and mapped sensitive areas that we don't want them to mow. And that includes things like areas for pollinator species, protected plant areas, and then we have some prairie plantings, and also areas with Phragmites and other known populations of invasive species that we don't want them to mow.
Okay, so they might not necessarily know about the invasive, they just know they're not supposed to.
Yeah, we give them maps, and maps don't always help, but they have them.
So Chris, I'm wondering, is there an easy way for us to tell from the outside for a given stretch of road who oversees that road, whether it's you guys or county or local?
For the Southwest region, we're kind of unique in that we have a very large direct maintenance staff. So for the most part, in the 7 counties, we're doing the majority of our roadside maintenance. We do have a contract with Branch County, a limited contract with Calhoun. We used to have a contract with Van Buren, but that's been modified. So and all of our spray is done by our direct staff. Some other regions in the state do use contract herbicide applicators, but we like to keep that in-house. And I have a slide down from here showing how many certified applicators we have in the Southwest region and some of the equipment we have available to us to do these applications. But we do try to do the invasive, all our herbicide applications with our direct staff. And as I mentioned, at these annual trainings we had, back when I first started about 12, 13 years ago, back when it was just Department of Ag, they would have a list of certified organic farms and also the certification or the notification registry for people who have medical conditions where they need to be alerted before we can go out and spray. And previously the organic farms, which need to be certified through MDOT, were given to us in a spreadsheet that had the property owner's name, township, range, section, quarter section, but you give that to somebody driving a spray truck and it didn't mean anything. So I used to have to work with our real estate staff and come up with hard copy maps. But now there's this program called Drift Watch, and it is linked on our website, and it's available to pretty much anybody. You just have to create an account, and then you can log in. And this is kind of a statewide listing of all the various sites they have. And again, I apologize for the quality of the slide, but I think it was about 6:30 this morning when I did a snapshot of that screen. And but anyway, there's a lot more detail in there. They've got beehives, certified organic farms, specialty crops, and so you can give this to the app or make it available to the applicators, and they know exactly where they got to be careful about their spraying. Because and here's a close-up of the area here, and right here in just north of us, there's several certified organic farms, and then if you click on those, it gives you property owner, you know, the name, acreage, and also a link to a website if they have one. So this gives the applicators a lot of information, and you can see on the one slide there, the actual properties are outlined in red. And so they can definitely tell, you know, where the property starts and ends. Because the actual legislation regarding certified organic farms just says you cannot have any drift onto that property. It doesn't give you any distance as far as stop 50 feet before you get there and don't start again until, you know, you're 50 feet beyond. And back when I was doing hard copy maps, I went out and looked at a lot of these sites, and some of them would have a sign up, but it would be back off behind the right of way and illegible. So it was kind of difficult for the herbicide applicators to judge. But now they've got this option, and actually what we're doing with some of our spray rigs now is hooking them up with interactive GPS and then loading this information in there so that when they come up to these areas, whether it's a certified organic farm, beehive, or whatever else, that it'll alert them as they're driving down the road.
There are a lot of variables in what affects the distance of a drift, a lot of obviously.
Yep.
And because I have in the past earned operator or applicator license for commercial use, I know that there are those who will go through the certification process, know what they have to do, and then completely disregard the rules anyway.
Yeah.
So how enforceable is that with your operators? How vulnerable are private farm owners, are they to that kind of enforcement?
Well, what we've decided at our region level is stop spraying, stop applying when you get to that property, and don't start again till you get to the other side.
Right.
You know, technically by the law, we could continue spraying, but we just have to make sure we control drift.
Right.
But we chose to stop and start up again rather than trying to, you know, control something that is highly variable, you know, with weather conditions and everything like that.
Okay.
And the sizes of drops that are applied, things like that.
Okay.
And actually, I got a slide with our, yeah, there it is. And like I mentioned, two of the things that we go over at that annual training is we have a drift management plan. First couple pages are the regulations that it addresses. And then there's some details on what our drift management plan is regarding weather conditions, times of day that are best to apply. And then each applicator has to sign the final page on this, indicating that they read it and understood it. And then they keep that in their spray manual, and they are to take that spray manual with them every time they're out applying, so that if somebody does have a question or a concern or a complaint, we have all the information right there, products, labels, application rates, safety data sheets, our drift management plan, and as I mentioned, we have our application rates, and these are tweaked pretty much annually. And we've got some invasive species, and we've got, you know, some aquatic ones, and we have some similar products that you were talking about, like for the Mirapris. There's Arsenal, which is not aquatic, and then Habitat, which is. And that's the one that's most effective in Japanese knotweed, but it does have some potential carryover effects, and we do use the Milestone also, which is pretty effective, but doesn't have quite as much carryover. But one thing we found is Milestone, black locusts are extremely sensitive to Milestone. And in general, a lot of people don't consider black locust to be a real valuable tree, but we kind of learned the hard way. We were doing some spray applications near Lansing on a boulevard area where they had landscaped black locust, and we used Milestone, and if their roots can sniff it, they're dead. So you know, we keep all that in mind when we're putting together our plans and make our applicators aware of all that. So we do the best we can to make sure they comply with everything. And then some specifics on the MDOT Southwest Region Program. We put together a public notice every year. I got a hard copy of that I can pass around if people would like to see it more closely. And this talks about all the products we use, what counties we're working in, the time frames. We got non-selective and then selective or additives and methods of application. And then part that draws me into it the most, contact information, which is me, which means I get the complaints. It was, you know, every year we get complaints, it's inevitable. And I try to get everybody to direct them to me so that everybody gets one answer from one source. We've had cases in the past where others have tried to address the complaints and didn't really provide complete information. And then they call somebody else, the complainant, and they get a different answer. So in the last few years, I've just asked everybody to send them to me, which during the spray period takes up a good amount of my time. But we also get calls asking what we're doing. I got a call from an individual on I-69, and I thought it was another complaint, but he asked what we're using on sumac because it was very effective. And he said, what can I get that product? And so he was actually looking for information to use on his property. But that's required by law that we do that public notice every year. And then we have 12 certified applicators that actively are in the field. We have other certified applicators who basically don't let me drive the trucks and anything fun like that. So I'm not one of our field applicators. And then we have 2 big spray rigs, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tractors that we put together and rigged for spraying. And what we do, here's some photos of our 2 big spray trucks. And these we use mainly for the big roadside applications, broadleaf. We've been doing some plant growth regulators recently to try and keep the number of mowing cycles down. So these are the ones you see rumbling along the side of I-94 and also some end routes. But we have these, we've selected 4 applicators that are experienced with them, and they're the only ones who operate these vehicles. Because calibration is something that's very important, and we go over that every year. Well, not me personally, but somebody from Purdue University comes up and goes through calibration with us. And so you gotta be really very familiar with rigging your driving to make sure calibration is proper, you're not applying too much chemical or not enough, because too much can obviously be bad, not enough, you're basically wasting time. And then I mentioned the tractors, and this is one that was fabricated in our Kalamazoo garage, and it just hooks up to our standard tractors. It's got a tank, it's got a hose reel system, and also it's got wands that extend out so you can spray straight down. And the hose is more for like a patch of Japanese knotweed where you want to stand next to it and do an application over, cover the entire plant. And then the booms are more for applications that are just down, like broadleaf and things like that. And then I got some photos of Japanese knotweed, illustrating some things that give us concern. And I mentioned this during the previous presentation. This is actually the site where they want this knotweed as a privacy fence. And so we've maintained it in our right of way. It was right up to the pavement. And as Hannah's demonstrator presentation showed, it'll break through pavement. So we have to make sure we keep that back. But there's a never-ending supply of it back there, and this particular property owner isn't interested in control.
Did you have maps so people who are mowing can avoid it, or your spray crews know about it? How did new infestations get reported? And
I've got a separate presentation that if we have time, I can do. We've got our own mapping system now, that we just put online last year. And it depends on, the number of questions you guys have. If I will be able to go through that present, but we have our own mapping system now, and we
For
do it.
internal use or for someone from the public to
It's for internal use only.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's similar to the MINS.
Yeah.
But we modified it from ArcGIS system, Esri ArcGIS system that we were using to inventory like culverts, signs, and other structures, and we worked with Lansing to modify it, to put in some other attributes regarding invasive species. So that's in the process of being developed. And if we have time, like I said, I can get to that presentation. But that's one of the problems we face sometimes. And then here's another one, a nice big patch of knotweed, and right behind it is a cornfield. So obviously we gotta be careful about spread. This actually isn't one of our roads, it was just a good representation of it. But if we were to apply there, we'd have to be careful about any migration up to the crops.
Have you seen the knotweed spread out into crop fields?
Surprisingly, based on what the farmers are doing, and also the type, because they use a lot of herbicides.
Yeah.
They probably use more herbicides than most any other group in the country. And so I don't see it getting into their crops very often, but it'll go right up to the edge.
Yeah. That's
So
what I see.
they're-
Yeah.
They're doing something to control it, and I also think some of the strains of, the plants they're growing have some ability to kind of push back.
There's BT that gets, I think, from the GMO corn.
Yep.
They'll actually put BT in this.
Yeah, because that, like I said, I'll see it right up to the edge, but not necessarily going back into the field itself. And this is an example of how I should have switched these around. This is a photo of one of our applicators spraying, and this is probably hooked up to one of those tractors I'd shown you. He's got the hose out and doing a broadcast spray over the population. This is one, and I will say this is not in the southwest region, where somebody just went through and mowed it before it was treated. So it's an example that we heard about a lot about earlier this morning that should not be doing.
What is the, so when you're doing the knotweed treatments, you're doing mostly broadcast applications?
Yep, for the most part.
And within what chemicals are you using and what concentrations?
I've got a copy of our application rates. Actually, maybe I have it right here.
So you're using different chemicals though, depending on
Depending on the situation, yeah.
where you're applying?
Yeah.
Because I think you had mentioned that you use Milestone in some cases, or you've used Habitat, Mazapir in some situations?
Japanese knotweed, mainly Milestone.
Okay.
Milestone with some Escort XP in there and some Improve.
So what rate do you apply the Milestone at?
14 ounces per acre.
Oh, that's the high end, okay.
Along that same thread, and maybe Leslie, you could address this too. I mean, this guy spraying here is in a pretty ideal situation because you have this huge plant, but he's got the perspective of being at the top of the ditch. If you are, average height and you can only reach up to about half the height of the plant, obviously for spraying, it's not ideal to be spraying above your head. Does it translocate well enough that you can sort of get the lower portion of the foliage and it will translocate? Or do you just sort of let that part die back and then get the interior the next year?
We've actually modified some of our spray tractors, and there's a separate presentation on that I didn't bring with me, but that same spray tractor you saw in the previous slides, we can adapt it with a boom that goes up and then over. And it was developed mainly for Phragmites because we're having the same problem with Phragmites. You could only knock back a little bit with the hand wand. So we came up with some wands that are above it that spray down into it. And that way you get a bigger path covered.
Great.
And then so you kill that swath. It may take multiple applications, but then you can move further back. Because some of our tractors can't even get through, especially the Phragmites.
Right.
And what are some of the other ways that you've addressed that, Leslie?
From a ladder works well.
Really?
I've stood on the edge of bridges, which I shouldn't admit. But I'd say probably the ideal situation is to be like in the back of a pickup truck or something. You just need to get up about 3 feet. And if you use a Mazepir, I actually have a feeling that you really don't want to dump a Mazepir on a site anyway. So there's a technique we often use, we call peeling the layer off of an onion. We get about 6 to 8 feet on the outside each year and just keep on moving in. And the main thing is to get it back from the roadside or from the riverbank so it won't spread, and that gives you the time to do it, not too much, not too much herbicide time. So-
Yeah, and that's what we try to do is knock it back layer by layer. But yeah, standing there at the wand isn't necessarily going to, or a hand sprayer isn't necessarily going to get you very far. So we have adapted our equipment so that we can get a longer first swipe through there, get a kill zone, and then move further back as time allows, or as we have access.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul has a question.
Depending upon how good you are at mixing cocktails, there are some products that you can use, like Petrobark, that opens up the lenticels on the stems, and you can just do stem applications if it's not too thick. You
Yep.
get in there. I mean, I've been in some stands where it's so thick it doesn't matter how long one you got, you can't. But still, if you can get, anyway, that's another one. So I prefer that over spraying, over the top to keep the drip.
And we have done some applications like that. We did an application at a wetland mitigation site where, and this was for Phragmites, not for Japanese knotweed, but it was coming up and it wasn't widespread yet. So we had our applicators out there with backpacks and they were focusing on individual areas where it was coming up and trying to knock that back first rather than spraying the entire area where we did have, on our wetland mitigation sites, we try to establish wetland vegetation. So we didn't want to affect the desirable vegetation and only where the Phragmites were coming up. So then we focused our applications by using backpacks.
So we are running a little short on time. The earlier presentations were a little long. But how about let's open it up for a round of questions. And I think one of the questions maybe that Leslie could, you touched on a little bit in your presentation earlier. What are some of the certification licensing requirements? So people here are land managers. They're doing this as their part of their job. They're going to need some certification from the Department of Agriculture. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the Michigan Department of Agriculture, MDOT, on their website, you can find their, what's called pesticide applicator certification, and all of us, even our volunteers in our group, have the commercial certification, and you do the core exam, and typically we do right-of-way and aquatic, so that we can treat in those, but it really depends. If you're doing ornamentals, you would get that certification. There are books available that are produced by Michigan State Extension that are study books. Usually I spend a weekend every year or every time I'm due to be recertified to go through those, but there are also courses given by Michigan State and I assume in the extension offices around the state to train so that somebody can teach you. And it's not a big deal. I think you have to pass 70% of the questions to pass, and all of us just routinely do that. And so I think it's great because it gives you the confidence to calibrate your sprayer, which is something actually in the demo this afternoon I can explain how to do that, and you know how to read the labels and what that label information, so it gives you more confidence that you're handling the chemicals safely, which I think is really important for you as well as the environment. So you need to do that. The other thing is if you're treating in a wetland area, you do need to do MDEQ, aquatic, what's called aquatic nuisance plant treatment permits, but the DEQ staff is super helpful and they will walk you through the process and make it as easy and accessible as possible. So, and typically doing a blanket permit, if you have many sites, to cover all of those in one permit makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it was touched on a little bit earlier, the permits are required if you're going to be applying over or near standing water. The definition of near isn't clearly defined by US EPA and the NPDES standards. So it's usually better to be on the safe side. And if you're gonna be applying, floodplain or even seasonal wetlands that there may not be water at all times of year, it's probably better just to go ahead and go through the permit process. It's, Leslie mentioned, it's not really that expensive. They've worked it out, with the new permitting requirements that, if you get the, certificate of coverage, it's only like $75. And they may be able to, you can include multiple sites, at one time in one permit. And it can be for multiple years depending on what your, the site that you're looking at.
Leslie, do you have does your group have a business license? I know there's some confusion over
Well,
what a
we're,
business license is and who needs it and.
from the presentation, I can't remember where was it, Stewardship Network, or something like that, about that. We decided we did not have to do that because we're all volunteer and we do not work for pay. And so, and we're not doing it thousands of acres or whatever, so it's not really relevant to us, but the business permit is something I don't have experience with, and I'm
Yeah,
not
so
sad about that.
If you are a contractor or you'll be applying for hire, then you do need to have a business license from the state for a pesticide business.
So a conservancy like yourself or Mitch, you don't need a business license.
Correct. We don't, I have a commercial applicator license just because I've had it for several years.
Yeah.
But any conservancy, our staff, we have to be licensed or we have to have the certification to apply on our
You're
properties.
treating on your own land.
Because we're treating on our own land. And so anybody too, any, park district or the city, those workers, if you're treating on your own city's property or right of way, you would need to have the certification. But you wouldn't necessarily need to have a business license. You only need the business license if you're going to be doing it for hire as a contractor or as a consultant. But then also, the conservancies, we've been approached and we've had discussions about applying on private property. And in that case, then we would have to go through the process of getting a business license, even if we're not getting paid in that situation because we're a company as well.
It's a good idea that, I used to work for Western Michigan University Grounds Department, and even though that's considered private property, we still kept, just like, we got our applicators to be certified, our groundskeepers and stuff, plus we kept all the needed records and stuff, just for the hell of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure your applicators are certified. Just necessarily don't need to go through the extra step of having the business license. And how about if we open it up to a few more questions?
We've heard the word milestone several times, and just a short while ago, I was talking to Heidi Fry from the Park Service. She's a forester and so on. And I suggested milestone to her for black locust control, because we've gone back to the same area of the park 4 years in a row, multiple times per year, and never been able to control it. And she said, our Park Service says we can't use it because it resides in the ground too long.
It has about 18 months residual activity, but it's a relatively safe choice in the sense that it's used on cattle forage, so it can be used on the food that the cows that we later eat. So, but it does, like, their manure has to be kept on site because it might have 18 months of residual activity. So it's just something to be aware of. I think any tree in the pea family, like redbuds and some conifers like juniper are sensitive, but that's listed on that cheat sheet over there, but it's only certain narrow group of species of trees and doesn't affect others, so.
Is it a sensitive site area, like maybe there's some endangered plants or?
They're trying to reestablish a prairie in that area, and the locusts just taken over.
Oh, yeah. It is, a lot of these problems, that's what makes them tricky, because what's efficacious might have off effects, so it's important just to know what decisions you're making up front. But milestone, we've had good success with it not hurting other trees, and also it just kind of sets knotweed back a bit every year. It's not nuking it,
There's another question over here.
Yeah, this isn't chemical related, I hope this is appropriate. Going kind of back to the previous presentation, there were photos of knotweed crawling under concrete and cement and asphalt. How long can that remain in a dormant or semi-dormant state and then do what it's gotta do? A knotweed, that is.
I haven't dealt with the infrastructure issues too much, but I can speak to like one area that we treated it and a massive infestation, like 4 to 5 clumps the size of this room along a ditch system. And we thought we had it down to the 1%, only 1% left level. And this year we had a wet spring and all of a sudden 25% of it was back. And so all I can say is I think it's like every time you're hitting the roots and you're getting more, but there are roots that are still alive. And I don't think they'll live forever if they can't keep on setting up stocks. But so you can have surprises, and it's very climate dependent. So I don't think it's easy to answer that, because it depends on how much water reaches the site and how many stalks are allowed to grow each year and stuff. But I would say for a few years anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does a product like Tordon work at all? Like if you were, like, you would apply to stumps or something like that, or is that?
I've never heard of Tordon being used for knotweed, and I know somebody who, Vern Stevens, may well have tried it, because he likes Tordon and he likes knotweed.
Yeah, I haven't,
Dow makes that Tordon and Milestone, and they tell you to use Milestone now,
Yeah.
not weed, so.
Yeah, we don't use Tordon, and we don't allow anybody to use
Yeah, Tordon is
Yeah,
I have no
yeah,
experience
it's
with knowing it all.
No, I don't think, is it, no, it's not.
no? Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Is it
Not now, I
too-
don't-
Too aggressive, yeah.
It's
Too
really,
aggressive.
it's real aggressive, anything it touches, it kills.
Right.
There's been some questions for the health effects for the user, I think, for that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we haven't really been talking about safety, but anytime you use any of these herbicides, long sleeves, chemical resistant gloves, especially when you're handling the concentrate, because that oily stuff allows it to penetrate your skin, so I don't think you can be too cautious. So,
Any other questions or comments or ideas? Yeah, in the back.
What about wildlife, deer and other critters that walk through the areas a lot? And can they migrate to the knotweed, or
Well, actually,
do they eat it, what?
yeah, if it's a fruit producing plant, then animals can obviously spread it. And this is kind of off topic, but back in 2009, we discovered a population of Oriental bittersweet up in Allegan County. And it is a really aggressive, nasty, invasive. And it produces lots and lots of fruit, and birds love it. And it spreads by the roots, and also you have this, tremendous system to broadcast the seeds through birds eating them, and then defecating out eating the fruits and defecating out the seeds.
Yeah, and in this case, the knotweed, it's mostly sterile,
Yeah.
the seeds, so, the animals as a vector probably isn't a big issue, compared to, where it's growing along a stream or river in a floodplain. That's going to carry parts of the plant downstream, or the mowing along roadsides, which will spread live pieces of the plant.
Yeah, what about the herbicides with regard to animal life?
Milestone, that's no issue at all, because you're using, what I really like about Milestone, you're using a really minute quantity of it. And it's actually, it was developed for use on crops that are fed to animals, food animals, so it's been extensively tested that way. Habitat, what I can tell you is, because I've read a lot about the aquatic effects, EPA has a website called EPA Tox. So you can actually look up the toxicity and what animals things have been tested on. And aquatic animals tend to be the most sensitive to any herbicide, and Habitat or Mazapir has very, very low tox. And I could tell you about glyphosate too. Glyphosate, the active ingredient toxicity is less than dishwashing liquid that we use on our dishes. If you just look at the IC50 data on it. So I think these 3 particular chemicals are good choices in terms of the least possible toxicity to animals.
Yeah, so and what's important with that then is to make sure that you're following the label application rates. The testing that they've done and the levels of toxicity are based on applying it correctly and using the right concentrations. So that's important. All these chemicals, the labels will give the appropriate rates to use. What are the maximum rates you can use over the course even of a season or of a year? And you wanna make sure that you're following those, so that you don't have any potential issues with affecting wildlife or fish and, amphibians, especially in areas if you're dealing with applying in wetlands or near rivers and streams.
Are the MSDS sheets readily available for Columbus County?
Yeah, you can,
Yes.
if you search, Google the chemical name, the brand name, there's several different sites that have either the, Monsanto or Dow, whatever the chemical company is, they'll have the MSDS and actually in copies of the labels available on their websites. And there's a couple other like clearinghouse organizations that have collected all of these, all of the MSDS and all of the labels and information that you can search for any chemical. So I would suggest, whatever one you're most interested in, just Google that and you'll pop up a couple of websites that you can access those resources.
In terms of the effectiveness, sometimes there's a mentality of, ooh, if 2% is really good, then 4% must be even better, but.
A little does a little good, a lot does a lot.
Yeah.
With Japanese knotweed, it's actually the opposite. Usually the real risk is if you top kill it, if it wilts right away, that means you're not translocating any into the roots, which is what you want to get. And another thing I just want to mention, the real toxicity issue with all of these things are the adjuvants. The adjuvants are not regulated or tested in the same way, and in many cases, we don't even know what's in the adjuvant because it's not required to be listed. So for that reason, I would always recommend, and it's recommended on that handout sheet, that you use the Signet Plus aquatic adjuvant, which is limonene, which is a natural product from lemons that's not toxic, because we know exactly what it is. There are no mystery ingredients, and anything that has a petroleum adjuvant by definition is then toxic because the petroleum is highly toxic to all animals. So I just try to avoid anything with a petroleum adjuvant, and I realize that's kind of a different approach, but it's really worth doing because then you never have to think you're doing bad as well as good.
Yeah, another question. We'll take a couple more. We're actually running into lunch, and I'm getting kind of hungry. I'm sure everybody is, but we'll take a few more questions and then we'll break.
I was gonna say two things. One is sort of when you hit the wildlife thing, is there anything I would think the only wildlife affected would be in August, your pollinators, if you have somebody, they've got a 2-mile radius around their beehives. And then, do you have to worry about using alkaline water, because the polyethylene amines, I used to be a chemist who worked out, they're more toxic when they're like in alkaline water when you're
Well, I haven't really studied that. I mean, we use city water, we don't use well water. Well water would inactivate glyphosate in particular, but I think that's a good issue to look into, the pH. Just sometimes we don't have an ability, I guess we could buffer it, but.
Yeah, in some cases, if you're gonna be using well water, that's something you may need to add a buffer, because some of those herbicides they can create precipitates, and they can, which will gum up, or they become less effective. They can I've had them, I've used well water before, and they end up, you gum up your sprayers and cause all kinds of problems. So if you don't know, if you're using city water, which has already been treated and generally it's much softer, you're probably not gonna have any problems. But if you're using well water, you may need to look at if you need to add a buffering agent to prevent that with some of those herbicides.
And with the pollinator issue, I mean, it really is a hard thing with knotweed because knotweed is covered with flowers in August, which is when we typically treat. So even though some people say treat it while it's flowering or whatever, if they're covered with bees, I do not feel good about that. So I try to treat it right at the beginning of flowering before there are many bees on it, or at the very end of flowering, if possible. Or milestone or aminopyrrolate is more effective used earlier in the season. And you can use that on upland only, so I would use aminopyrrolate if possible.
And they have the LD50 for honeybees on that website you mentioned, right?
Oh, okay.
EPA tax, probably.
You'd have to look, they usually test a certain range of organisms. I haven't looked at the bee values, but I should.
Yeah, and actually, I think it was in 2014, presidential memorandum came out regarding pollinator species.
That's good.
Yeah, and I'm on a subcommittee within MDOT addressing what we do that currently benefits pollinators and things we can change or do differently in the future to benefit pollinators. So that's become, actually I just went to a conference in Chicago back in July, and getting approval for out-of-state travel is horrendous. They let me go because management does consider it to be a very important topic.
That's great.
Well, one more question.
Yeah.
Treatment in and around rain gardens? Because you know where the water might end up.
Well, I would suggest in that case, you probably would want to use, you know, use an aquatic approved pesticide. You may not, you know, in that case, you probably don't need any type of wetland permit. But using one of the aquatic herbicides would probably be your best bet, just so you don't have any potential issues with some of those other, like the milestone, which you can't use near water at all. And in that case, you may want to assess whether you want to use one of the ones that has any residual effects, because if it carries into your rain garden, you may damage some of the native plants that you've planted there. So that's where you have to look at, you know, the trade-offs of what's going to be the most effective to treat the knotweed versus what you have in the surrounding area that you need, that you want to protect, or things that you don't want to harm. That you may need to use one of the herbicides that might be a little less effective and will take longer, but is going to have less detrimental effects to the surrounding area.
That's one benefit we didn't mention about Milestone, is it doesn't hit grasses at all. So it's already selective to
Broadleaf.
dicots, yeah.
All right, so we've gone into lunch, so we'll break. If anybody does have any questions, you know, we'll be around. I'm not sure, Dr. Kuhn will be doing part of the demonstration this afternoon, I believe.
Something, something like that, putting up my sprayer.
And, you know, the resources, the SISMA, we have resources on the Berrien, or it's the Van Buren County, the Van Buren Conservation District website. That was in the morning presentation. So if there's more, you know, if you need more information, there's more contact information, people you can get in touch with. If you have some specific questions that we might be able to help you answer or talk about. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you.